Dune Part 2 is still running hot during its theatrical run right now, and everyone's talking about it, which everyone should be doing. It feels like another step towards the return to big spectacle blockbusters with passion and creativity, reminding me of franchises like the Lord of the Rings films, the original Star Wars trilogy, or some of the greater James Bond films. But what if Dune and its sequel had released 20 years ago? I know that we would have gotten the official Dune video game that is a play-by-play of the movie, featuring very forced stealth levels, beat-em-up style combat, and maybe if we're lucky, FMV footage of the movie in between levels to hook the player. It would have come out for every single available console, including handhelds, and you would have seen previews and demo footage at your local game store kiosk. The licensed movie tie-in game is very much a relic of the past, but one that I carry a lot of nostalgia for. These were everywhere, and you could bet that if there was a popular action movie or children's movie, it would receive a tie-in game that would typically launch within a year of the film's release. And the most important feature that many of them shared? These games were hardly the epitome of the industry and the best it had to offer. When you think of classic Star Wars games, you're probably thinking of something more original like Knights of the Old Republic, Battlefront, or even the LEGO Star Wars games. But I don't hear too many people talking about the Revenge of the Sith video game. Well, damn it, I've got 20 or so minutes to kill, so I'm here to stick up for the little guy. Kind of. There's a lot of heaping garbage slop that was pumped out year after year to mainly serve as marketing and advertising for their respective properties, but every now and then a shining diamond in the rough would show the others how it's done. And I'd say there's even worth in the more mediocre garbage, as it harkens back to a time where video games were still primarily seen as toys. They make for an interesting time capsule that's worth preserving. I want to dive into 3 different games from my childhood that I would say all classify as movie games. They're not all necessarily movie tie-in games, as 2 of these aren't directly attached to any one specific film, but rather a franchise that is primarily known for the films. We have 007 Agent Under Fire, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader, and The Lord of the Rings The Two Towers, all released for the GameCube, with Rogue Squadron 2 actually being an exclusive game that's still only officially playable on the console, unless you feel like sailing the high seas. A big thank you to Long Play Archive for permission to use their gameplay footage, as I wasn't able to capture footage myself. I played all 3 of these games the way Miyamoto intended, on original hardware with my little CRT TV, which was great as it helped the art styles really shine, especially for Rogue Squadron 2. I never owned the Lord of the Rings game, though I did have the sequel as a child, Return of the King. As for the other 2 games, while I do remember owning them, most of my memory for these games doesn't extend very far past the first level. I want to clarify what I mean by calling these games movie games. Unlike something like Knights of the Old Republic, I would say that the biggest selling point for all of these games is that they
make you feel like Spider-Man.
A major draw for these is how much they're trying to emulate the feeling from their respective films. These games are designed in a way that feels like they had to meet some kind of reference quota, so you're constantly being bombarded with sights and sounds to remind you of what you're playing, even just starting with the main menu, a topic I've previously talked about. Agent Under Fire has the main James Bond film theme playing in the background, along with very seductive women dancing in all their 480p glory. Rogue Squadron has clips from the original trilogy playing on loop in the background, and Two Towers' menu has access to interviews with the film cast about voicing their video game counterparts. I can't even imagine seeing something like behind-the-scenes commentary in a modern release. It makes the games feel like counterparts to the DVDs you would collect for these movies too, with the extra little bonuses and features you would come to expect. DVDs were hugely popular at the time, so it makes sense for a bunch of movie video games to be designed like the same DVDs that would be made for these films. I love this, and it's always a fun surprise or treat whenever a game comes loaded with developer commentary or background. Sometimes the history behind how a game gets made is even more interesting than the game itself. Jumping into their introductions, Agent Under Fire starts off with a traditional tutorial mission that guides you through what you might expect, with little bonus challenges to complete that blast the James Bond theme song at you when you find them. The first level is short, but gives the player enough opportunity to mess around with the tools and become accustomed to the controls. Also eventually leading directly into a fun little shakeup where you get to an exciting car chase that reminds me of some of the spectacle you would expect from a Call of Duty campaign. To top it off all with cheesy voice acting, Agent Under Fire makes a pretty good first impression.
Sorry, miss. I'm with the new security team sent by the Home Office. I seem to have taken a wrong turn.
It definitely has the benefit of having something like GoldenEye 64 as a frame of reference to go off of when it comes to designing a James Bond game. I would have talked about GoldenEye here as that's probably one of the most famous movie games ever, but what could I say that hasn't already been said before? I think Agent Under Fire is a more interesting case for this, as it's not a direct film to game adaptation, but rather taking a film franchise and trying something original. It's a quality that's shared with Rogue Squadron. Speaking of which, the first level of Rogue Squadron is exactly what one would want as a Star Wars fan. the mission to destroy the Death Star at the end of the original film. It plays like a crazy dogfight free-for-all, letting the player get accustomed to the space combat by giving them a level with a lot of enemies to shoot down. It's a great introduction that gives the players a space to get familiar with the controls, which are so buttery smooth that they contrast with the more rugged, early 80s mechanical designs of the X-Wings. Between the 3 movie games, I would say Rogue Squadron shines the most when it comes to visual fidelity and moment-to-moment gameplay. The game looks incredible, and I was especially impressed with some of the lighting. After taking out enough turrets, you perform the iconic trench run and fire your missiles at the right time to take out the Death Star, a moment that any Star Wars fan likely has committed to memory. But this first introductory level made me realize something. I have no idea how this game would work if you didn't know anything about Star Wars. See, I knew that I needed to use the missiles because that's how Luke saves the day in the film, but if you had never seen the movie, would you have known to use your missiles here at this time? Funny enough, this is a problem that I noticed on Mission 3, which is another mission that is directly adapted from the films. In order to progress and take out the walkers on the battle for Hoth, you need to use the towing cable that is only built for this type of ship. But if you've never seen the movies, would you even know that? Thankfully, the game does include an extended cutscene that introduces the idea to the player for any who might have been unfamiliar. But the opposite happened with me. I initially kept failing this mission over and over because I was too eager to take out the walkers, and I'd end up ignoring what the game actually wanted me to do, which was to shoot the smaller walkers first until the game clued me in that it was time to take out the larger walkers with the towing cables. My knowledge of the film actually prevented me from completing the mission quicker than I likely would have compared to the original missions in the game, where I was following directions from the game more closely. The connection to the film was a hindrance here, but at least it doesn't hamper the presentation. The voiceover you'll hear for most of the game, whether during missions or little introductions to the different ships in the hangar bay, these are all actually performed by Dennis Lawson, who played Wedge in the original films and returns for Rogue Squadron.
My scope shows the tower, but I can't see the exhaust port. You sure the computer can hit it?
Working with Bothan technicians, Commander Luke Skywalker has helped uncover secret data vital to the rebellion,
which is even highlighted as a selling point on the back of the box. Imagine that, a Dune video game where a selling point on the back is Javier Bardem playing Stilgar. Celebrity voiceovers and performances are still a major selling point for games being released today. Just look at Hideo Kojima casting so many big Hollywood actors in his games now. It's a part of the industry that's managed to stick around. Similarly to Rogue Squadron's adherence to original film cast members, the Two Towers is loaded with interviews of the original film cast. These are incredibly charming due to the awkwardness of some of the actors, but still a fun extra bonus feature.
The scripts and you say all these wonderful lines. Ambush! Ambush!
Circling back to the introductions, 007 is the most traditional, introducing the mechanics in a very controlled and linear space. Rogue Squadron aims to repeat the finale of the original film, while letting the players get a feel for the controls and gameplay. What does Two Towers do? At the time of this game's release, EA chose not to originally release an adaptation of the first film, Fellowship of the Ring. They also only had the rights to the film license, meaning they couldn't adapt anything that was not included in the films. With all that being established, they jumped right to the second film in the trilogy for these games, but included some levels, footage, and plot from Fellowship of the Ring, including an abridged but mostly faithful intro of the original first film. It genuinely surprised me to see how much of the intro scene they kept. It was wild to see them just stick with the original film's intro without seemingly any edits to trim it down, only jumping into gameplay where it would naturally begin, with Isildur facing off against Sauron's army. It's a clusterfuck of a mission and a bit hard to tell what's happening, but the constant flip-flopping between scenes from the film and the game made this arguably the most faithful of film-to-game adaptation, and it made me realize how much I miss FMVs in games. Funny enough, we got a recent example of some of that lost FMV art form with the cooking videos in Dragon's Dogma 2. Many other licensed games based directly off of films would play clips from the original movie, and as a child, these scenes would feel like little rewards as you played through the game. I got excited unlocking these, even though they were no different and no more special than the scenes from the original films, but I think tying it with gameplay helped me enjoy the scenes more because it didn't just feel like watching a film, but participating in one. Past the intro levels, these games play out how you would expect. Their first levels are all great for setting expectations. Agent Under Fire acts as what you would come to expect from the formula that was established with GoldenEye 64, taking major inspiration from the films without directly adapting any one. There's extra level types like car chase sequences and stealth missions to break up the pacing and add some much needed variety. Although from what I noticed, it was lacking the more open-ended style missions from GoldenEye, which was disappointing. The linear levels are more focused and polished, but I would have liked to have seen levels that offered some more agency and choice choice for the player. The only example I noticed was a small moment in the intro level where you had a choice of how to begin the level, but this didn't really amount to much of anything. Rogue Squadron immediately starts off with a direct adaptation of one of the most iconic moments in film history, before progressing back and forth between original levels and recreating moments from the original trilogy. While the recreated moments are enjoyable, I found myself enjoying the original levels more, even though I found some difficulty with them regarding how to progress in the missions. Some of the objectives seem vague, but an important aspect of Rogue Squadron is taking the time in the hangar bay to learn about the extra features of a ship, or reading in the instruction booklet. I found myself stuck on mission 4 for the longest time because I wasn't aware of a special charged shot that was required to deactivate the shield and progress in the level. But learning about the secondary weapon systems and paying careful attention to the dialogue of the mission helped overcome that little hurdle, which is immensely satisfying once I figured it out. Rogue Squadron 2's mission variety is the strongest of the 3 games as well, requiring a little more careful thinking from the player, instead of just shoot enemies to win. Two Towers plays like a natural progression of the first 2 films of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, with hack and slash beat 'em up levels that are reminiscent of Gauntlet. Unlockable combos incentivize progressing through the game to be able to more efficiently take out enemies, but the setting of the game and the inclusion of some of the excellent film score help boost the fun. This also applies to Rogue Squadron. Having this theme from Empire Strikes Back blasting in the background of Mission 8 is exhilarating, and every Star Wars game should have a mandate of including this track. Now and forever, it should be non-negotiable. I'd say all the games are pretty polished for the time and hold up quite well, despite having not played these games in well over a decade and remembering nothing. I was having a great time with all of them. I've mentioned this before, but Rogue Squadron 2 really does look great, and I was continuously impressed, progressing from level to level. On an old CRT, the space battles are even more hectic and impressive, with the stars blending into the background, and enemy fighters being harder to see against the black vacuum of space, which for me only added to the fun of hunting them down. Rogue Squadron 2 would look and play great even by today's standards, and it's a shame that it's never had some form of modern port or re-release. Even though these games are directly from my childhood, this isn't nostalgia talking. Most of my memories of games at this age typically revolve around the first couple of levels, because I would have such a blast playing them that I didn't even have a concept of completing them or succeeding. I had fond memories, but I couldn't remember why. Going back with a fresh set of eyes helped me appreciate how much fun these games actually are, ignoring all nostalgia. Does that mean these games are completely flawless? Before I even address these 3 games, it's important to reiterate that 90% of licensed film games were cheap, mediocre cash grabs that were primarily designed to make a profit. Most of them don't have much creative originality or insight, but I would still argue that they all possess a charm that's missing today. One thing you'll notice from the 3 mentioned games is that they're all quite short, and this is a trend you'll find in most licensed movie games. Some of the levels in Agent Under Fire and Rogue Squadron 2 have some gimmicks that can be tricky to understand at first and require some trial and error, but if you know some of the tricks, you'll be able to complete each of these games in under 4 hours. Game length is an evolving debate in the industry today, and I don't mind the shorter lengths, but everyone has their different preferences, and I would say that each of these games have different appeal when it comes to replay value and how it's handled. And I'm not sure how audiences reacted originally with these full-price retail releases and their seemingly limited content. Rogue Squadron and Two Towers have some replay value regarding replaying older missions with new ship types and different characters, but I don't think it extends far beyond that. Agent Under Fire has the benefit of having the classic 007 multiplayer that GoldenEye started, and it's honestly as fun as one would hope. You get a bunch of settings to play with, AI bots to include if you don't have 4 players, and extra dumb toys and gadgets like a full grappling hook that's taken from the campaign. When it comes to the overall level design and mechanics, some moments can be repetitive, especially with the Two Towers game, as the hack and slash gameplay can wear thin pretty quick when you start relying on the same 3 combos to abuse the enemy AI. I enjoyed myself all the way through, especially with the final levels of the Battle of Helm's Deep acting as a giant free-for-all, but that may not be saying much given how short the length is. Character models are the biggest signs of age. Rogue Squadron 2 has it pretty great, with the primary character pilot model looking and animating pretty well, but Agent Under Fire and Two Towers unfortunately suffers from some goofy moments, but they never failed to entertain me, so I wouldn't even call this a flaw, just aging hardware and industry standards. These games wear their intentions proudly on their sleeves, with disregard for some modern design philosophies that it's almost impressive. Rogue Squadron 2 and the Two Towers do almost nothing to catch the player up to speed on the plot, setting, or player motivation. They're designed like companion pieces to the movies, at a time when video games were still mostly seen as toys that you would primarily buy from like a Walmart, and not as their own unique emerging form of entertainment. It was so blatant that this is literally how the Two Towers game ends. with a setup for the sequel releasing alongside the Return of the King film. Actually, the video game adaptation released a whole month prior to the film, which is insane to think about. In the current state of this industry today, could you even fathom a game's sequel being advertised at the end of the current release? With most games and sequels taking upwards of 5 years now, I had almost forgotten that 2 years was considered a common length for game development back in the day. What we've lost in goofy charm that is meant to emulate the direct feeling of a film, we now have watered down AAA games that often feel like they were made in a factory, tested to appeal to the widest market without making enough of a unique identity on their own. Some of these releases are great and absolutely worth your attention, like Alien Isolation, but many of them feel too safe to offer any kind of meaningful or memorable experience. I don't mean to shake my fist and sound like an old fart, because a vast majority of licensed games made back in the day were slop, hoping to squeeze extra money out of parents who wanted to buy something nice for their kids without really knowing what they were getting into. But every now and then, between all that slop, we would find gems that would never be made today. I feel that the state of licensed games perfectly reflects the state of the industry. A focus on expensive, bigger, but safer games with the intent to maximize profits, sanding down any potential edge and oversight that now results in a major loss in charm and personality. I'm being overly nostalgic, and I thrive on being wrong about many things, but there was a charm to these games that I think is forever lost to time. Or at least, I did think that, until the release of Terminator Resistance and RoboCop Rogue City, both developed by Teon. With how faithfully these games capture the feeling I'm talking about, I wouldn't be surprised if they were time travelers from the late 90s. These guys understand the charm of movie games better than anyone, and they're still aiming to deliver that classic lovable jank that feels like the physical copies for these games can sit right alongside your brand new 4K release of Terminator 2. I hope Teon keeps on with their classic film game crusade, as I think they're reviving a dying art form that deserves to be remembered. The movie game is a special kind of janky, clunky, awkward, goofy game that's full of heart, talent, and creativity when the pieces all come together. Maybe if we're lucky, Teon can be the ones to deliver a Dune game that has all the awkward voice acting and stealth missions that a gamer can handle.
I must not play modern licensed games. Modern licensed games are the mind killer. Modern licensed games are the will death that brings total obliteration. I will face licensed games. I will permit them to pass over me and through me. And when they have gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see their path. Where the licensed game is gone, there will be nothing. Only clunky movie games will remain.